Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kate Sosin from the 19th and the film. I'm so excited to be with you here with Princess A. Hairston, one of our 3 co-directors from the film, and Laura Zhang-Choi, who you just saw from 21 Warren County, an amazing advocate and activist, and the mother of a trans kid. We are going to jump into a lively discussion here, and I'm so excited to get into it. I'm going to start with you, Princess. How did this film come about, and how did it evolve?
Yeah, so we have 3 directors for this film. Heather Courtney was the first director. She had followed Emily's career at the Texas Tribune, heard that Emily was doing a news startup, a whole new digital news startup. And so Heather reached out to Emily and asked her if she could document their year, their journey, reporting leading up to the 2020 election and how that would be different than legacy newsrooms. Then the pandemic happened. It was a major shift in the film. It was a major shift for the 19th. And so as the 19th was pivoting and growing, Heather also pivoted and brought other co-directors on to kind of mirror what the 19th was doing. And so, yeah, this film is definitely different than standard docs with 1 director. So we have 3 directors.
I want to dig into that a little bit because one of the things I really admire about the film, and that I don't think a lot of people know, is that the representation sort of your film team mirrored a lot of the representation of the 19th as it grew, which is that, as we sort of diversified, so did your team. And I think that's really cool. And it sort of speaks to the challenges I think that you all faced as we sort of face them. And I would love for you to just kind of go into that and talk about how you met the challenges that you all were working with at the same time that we did.
Yeah, Heather kind of realized that this film needed other voices and key positions in the director's role, so she quickly brought on Chelsea Hernandez, who is a Latina person and kind of around the Texas area. She brought myself on. I'm African American. I'm kind of in New York, covering a lot of the journalism around there. And we brought on Diane Kwan, who is Asian American. So Heather is white American. We all have different lived experiences. We brought different perspectives to the filmmaking. The 19th is filled with diverse voices. We realized we didn't have a trans voice in the directing team, so we reached out to an EP in the San Francisco area who really helped us out with that missing perspective that we definitely needed. And, in the 19th film and then Breaking the News, we see the 19th going through some challenges when bringing in the gender aspect to include LGBTQ plus folks like yourself, and we had those same challenges. You know, being inclusive ourselves, all being women. How do we be inclusive with LGBTQ plus? How do we stay on pronouns and representation and being respectful, the sensibility around all of that? And it's something that you know, we were up and down with the whole time with making a film and trying to improve. And I think it's just a work in progress because we all need to be working on gender equity and gender inclusion in our everyday lived experience and our the way we speak, the way we change language around it.
Laura, I want to bring you into this because I know for myself that it's a vulnerable thing to decide to be on camera. And I imagine it's even more vulnerable to decide to do that with your family, especially in this political climate, when you have a trans child. Can you talk about what that decision making process looked like for you, and just kind of what the response has been?
I want to say that most of the projects and work that I stumble into, um, really just required my courage to say yes to them. And, I don't think my family is extraordinary, or, or my story is unique. I just, it was a lot of pieces where, I said yes to one project and one thing. I showed up one time, and this feature came about when the assistant producer reached out to me because she saw an article where I was mentioned because I showed up to testify about data disaggregation for the Asian American community in New Jersey. And so they were interested to learn about that. And then in the article, it didn't mention at all that I was a school board member or I'm an activist in the LGBTQ community, but that just, it happened in conversation, and they were just interested in the different intersectional work that I happen to be in. And again, I often don't find that I pursue them, but they kind of happen, and I'm in the right place at the right time to say yes. We need to tell these stories, because this isn't a story that I've heard or that I've seen, and I want to, representation is just so important, and visibility of families like mine, especially in my community of, Asian American community, and in the community of faith. My husband is also a minister, and so I feel a responsibility to tell these stories, that to show folks that we're just people, who love our kids and who want to create a world that, where everyone belongs. So.
Your story really touched me, because I feel like, and we say this a lot, the stories we see, especially of trans kids right now in media and their families, are overwhelmingly sad. They're overwhelmingly negative. Your story is not only the story at the intersection of race and LGBTQ plus issues, but it's also one that is affirming and positive. I'm curious, what is your experience in community with your family, and what do you want to communicate to people who may not know a trans kid, or a family like yours?
Well, as I mentioned, I just find representation and visibility to be so important to normalize, conversations, and to normalize people of all genders and sexualities. Like, if I want to be a champion of, educational equity and inclusion, no one should be left out. So, and I think when I was a college student, and studied multicultural education or inclusion, it was a different population that was being excluded. So, the population for inclusion, exclusion, they evolve over time. And I just feel like in this moment, it is the LGBTQ community, students that are being ostracized, that are being, villainized in the media, and I did not choose for this story to happen to my family, but I overwhelmingly hear stories about families that reject their children, and that and I wanted to hear a different story. I wanted to be a different story, and I wanted the world to know a different, to see a different representation, and that it's okay to love our kids, no matter how they come, and this radical love and inclusion, it calls to to all people to um, yeah, to protect their kids. And I think that more recently, the policies that are being just discussed in the media have just been so harmful. And oftentimes they're not rooted in facts, and but they are expressed out of fear and out of discomfort, out of ignorance, of not having the proximity with people who are in the LGBTQ community. Um, and so I think, I mean, we see it just within, very recently with the death of Nex Benedict, a non-binary child, and it guts me, because I can think of when my child came out to us in 2017. It was a tumultuous time, but in the space of educational policies and educational inclusion space, it was a very welcoming time. But we kind of see that shift, you know, over time, and it definitely in the last couple of years, it's been more dangerous for students in schools. Yeah.
We've seen a lot change, a lot, a
Mhm.
lot. One of the things that I realized, especially watching the documentary for the first time and even in subsequent times, is how much of a time capsule it feels like. Even though it wasn't that long ago, it feels like I'm watching history. And
Mhm.
Princess, I've wanted to ask this, but like, was there a point when you were making the film at which you realized that you had this kind of Trump slash pandemic time capsule that you had created, or this history where we look back and see just how much the country had changed in such a short amount of time? Because watching that all at once was astounding, I think.
Yeah. It is interesting because, kind of picking back on what Laura mentioned, it seemed like we were progressive. I don't know, maybe the tail end of President Obama. I felt like LGBTQ plus rights
Mhm.
were changing in a positive way, in a positive progressive way, where we were seeing acceptance, more acceptance. We were seeing more acceptance in some ways for different races and different voices, different communities. And I thought we were making a big shift as a country, as the world, as humans. And for some reason, it's just like everything started to tumble. That's what it felt like. It was like tumbling blocks. Like we were going up and up, and then it was like, no, absolutely not. Let's start to shut it down. It felt like forces were just shutting things down. It seemed like all of this rage just came out of nowhere, like this ball of rage. Like, no, you can't have those rights. No, I'm scared my kid could be, uh, is being taught the wrong thing about it's like religious beliefs and all the things that are so restrictive. It felt like it was just all the restrictions came piling down, and it was shocking. It was shocking. And then Roe versus Wade, like abortion rights, and it is still from the same voices that have dominated media, have dominated creating harmful laws. Um, it's so weird, and I'm just like, I'm just so shocked by it, and I'm shocked that the people who come from those marginalized communities, or I'm just shocked that we have to still do the advocacy work while we're healing. Like we're trying to heal from so much trauma, and we're doing the work to still combat just harmful practices. And it's just really sad to see a lot of the progress, that we all, a lot of communities and groups have done to get this far, and to see it come tumbling down in a bowl of rage.
I'm curious because both of you have given us really hopeful narratives, right? Despite these really difficult things that are happening around us. Um, how do you do that? Um, is that a difficult thing to do? And do you feel hopeful in the moment?
I think that depends on the day that you ask me, the moment that you ask me. There's definitely, I think when I first heard of the 16-year-old Nexus death yesterday, there were definitely, I think I sulked for a while, and just feeling overwhelmed with a sense of hopelessness, of despair, of why do we keep doing this if this is what's happening to our kids? Um, and but this is why we have to keep doing it, because this is what's happening to our kids. Um, and it is, we need more people to more courageous people to say yes and to advocate, whether or not they have a trans child. I'm thinking about, during the civil rights movement, it's when you don't have people in proximity to you who may be affected by unjust laws. You can say one thing, you can say you believe in civil rights, and yet it's easy to walk away because it doesn't affect you. It's of no consequence. But this, and it takes the people who are on the sidelines to step up, to say no, this can't happen, because we we are one humanity. We are, we all deserve equal rights and um, equal representation and equal voice, equal seats at the table, and you know, not just be grateful for the crumbs that fall. And so, I think, yeah, I think the hope is that I know I have seen spaces where this is possible. And, that has been, and that's only because there were courageous people before me who's done the work and who, created these communities that I'm like, yes, like that, this is possible. And so I need to be doing that where I am, wherever I am. So hopefully those behind me will be able to have that hope as well and work for it.
You know, yeah. From my perspective, I guess the best way to describe it is like my parents grew up in segregation and went through growing up in the U.S. when schools were desegregated. Like that was my parents. So my parents went to segregated schools and then they went to desegregated schools. So it's only one generation away uh, for me, as far as the way African Americans have been treated in this country, which is, it was so vile and evil. But my parents taught me love. They didn't teach me to be a hateful person or this happened to you, so this group of people, um, you should do whatever you can to make their lives miserable or anything like that. I grew up in a family of love. They still taught me to respect people. They still taught me to listen to people and give people chances. Despite this history, you need to be a good person. You need to work on yourself. Um, and so I think about how, what's happening now in schools, how parents could possibly, like, I feel like the teachings I learned when I was a child stuck with me when I was older. I feel like that's core time where what you learn in your younger years from your parents in your household really follows you for throughout your lifetime. And so, even knowing what happened to next, and just like, I can't even imagine a group of kids doing that, like, where someone is no longer with us, and they're so young. They haven't even gotten out in the world and explored the world. And it's just the level of hatred that they've learned through media, through their parents, through, there's so many avenues that they could have learned it through social media now. And so, we really have to work hard. Like, I can't stop working or stop being an activist, because you know I was taught good things from my parents, and I'm progressing as a human. I'm changing even things that I might have been taught about LGBTQ plus through religious beliefs. That was not right. A lot of those teachings were just so harmful. And so, me, as I move in the world as a human being, this is how I want to move in the world. I disagree with that. So I have a voice to speak up. I have a voice to challenge harmful practices, harmful thoughts, harmful behaviors, harmful laws. And that's what I need to do. And I think it's totally fine. I have discussions with my family when old people might say the certain things, and people say, oh, they're just old. Well, no, you're still living in this world, and we're progressing in this world. And here is why, a couple of reasons why this is harmful, what you said. And there's no problem with that. We can't just say, oh, well, that's what we did back in the day. No, because we need to progress, and those type of statements are just not even allowed at this point, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to add for folks, and I know we're still so early in this, you know, um, it the the loss of Nex, I know, is hitting all of us really hard, and it is still so early. It's hard to know what exactly happened, and we're just waiting for lots of answers. And so, I know that in time, hopefully, we will get those, um and understand, and we know that whatever Nex was facing at school, it sounds like there was a lot of bullying, and we will find out sort of about this particular incident. Um, Princess, there's something that I've just desperately wanted to ask the filmmakers about for so long. And it's something that stuns me every time I see this film, which is like, what was it like for you all to have this footage of Aaron getting the Breonna Taylor story, and just have that and sitting on it for years? Like, was that like such a oh my gosh moment? Um, like, you're just holding this beautiful piece of history. And there are other stories like that, sort of in this film, but like that moment in particular, just like every time I watch it, I just sob.
Yeah.
What was that like for you all to have captured that on film?
Yeah, and that was so early on too. There was so much going on around, that time in 2020, with multiple deaths of Black people. But Breonna Taylor, like, Aaron recognizing that that is a story that she should get out there. Um, because honestly, from the gender lens, it was great because she was a Black woman. We hear a lot about Black men passing away due to police violence. Um, but in reality, for Black Americans, it's both genders. It's happening across the. I've had encounters with police that people don't even understand. They're like, what? It's just weird, but it's not weird to us, because it's a discriminatory practice that we as Black Americans face. So when Aaron recognized that as a story, and to hear the discussions, about whether that's a story the 19th should tell. And us seeing that discussion, and then also how Aaron really tapped in to tell a beautiful story and get that out there. You know, and for that story to pick up traction and put the 19th like on the map. So it was like twofold. She brought out this horrific story on this Black woman. It had been weeks since Breonna Taylor had been killed, and Aaron jumping on that story to tell it. And then the 19th is a new news startup, and for that story to really put the 19th on the map, it was, it's beauty and it's sad, because we're telling a sad story and an unfortunate story that could have been avoided, but it's also such a key moment for why the 19th needs to exist, why the 19th needs to be in play for news stories that matter, news stories that are way beyond the traditional mold of storytelling and journalism. So, I mean, that was just like a key pivotal point, and we've kind of forgot about it because it was so early on, and we kept filming. We were filming, multiple journalists at this time. We're traveling, we're dealing with dual pandemics. So when we were in the edit room and the editor shaped that scene, we were like, we got that. We got that. That was such a pivotal thing. It was so strong for us, and in those ways that I discussed, it was really pivotal, and we were so glad that we were able to capture that.
The producer sent this question, I think, for me to answer, which is, how's the 19th dealing with these issues differently from mainstream media? So I guess I'm going to answer that, which is, I think that's evolved over time. And I kind of want to talk about what we see in the film, which is that sort of a news organization starting in infancy to figure this out. And I'd like to share with people that now we're 40% LGBTQ plus in our staff. And the 19th is incredibly diverse. Like, we're a big staff. And I want to note that when our staff watches the documentary now, they're like, wait, all of this happened? Like, we had no idea, right? Which is not to say that the 19th is perfect and that all of this is solved, but it's just, there's been a massive cultural shift in terms of our competency to cover the issues that I think we really struggled with, and also just the community that we have for reporters, and just the way that we reflect the stories that we want to cover in our staff. And so, but the other thing is, I think historically, like, we've come to stories, and I say we as reporters or this industry, trying to cover like these two political sides. Like, those are the only two sides that exist. And I think for us, we have honed in on like just honoring each person as an individual and as a human, and just holding a line at all of our humanity, right? Like, whoever we are, and centering that instead of focusing on this like false dichotomy of these two political viewpoints, which really limit us and erase the nuances of who we are. And so I think in doing that, like, we've been able to tell more interesting stories and more honest stories. And so I feel proud of that, like, to have been part of that. And I feel like I've learned a lot from a news organization that's willing to do that. And I just want to put that out there, because I think the film shows me like educating a lot of people, but I also feel like I've learned so much from my colleagues. So just wanted to put that out there. I'm curious for you all, how you feel in this particular political moment, and what are the stories that you feel like we need more of?
Um, well, I'm still thinking about that, but I do want to uh, respond to what you just said, Kate, because one of the most poignant moments for me in the film, in the documentary itself, that it was it was the launch day of the 19th, and everyone was celebrating. And then there was that scene where you said you were in a fetal position crying, and 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 that was just so, I mean, it tugged on this mama bear's heart, right? But also, but also how much in, how in I, I saw the progression of folks, saying they want to do the work, but then, not realizing what they don't know. Right? Like it, and I feel like that is constantly I need to constantly remind myself also that I don't know, and I need to keep learning. I need to keep learning how to support the community, and how to, not how to advocate for what they want and not what I think they want. um, and um, yeah, but I just really admired and respected the way that, like, you like, it was obvious that people grew. They did try to do some of the work, and try to learn, and try to, and I feel like that is what we are all called to do, right? Like, if we want to exist and be participate in a more inclusive world, um, we have to acknowledge that we don't know it all, and we don't know how to do it all, and we need each other to and learn from one another to do this work. Um, so yeah, I just really, so thank you for that moment, and being vulnerable and honest about how hard it is, and yet, um, you know, I, yeah, it was a lovely scene. Um,
Thank
so yeah, I'm sorry, I already lost the question.
No, you know what? I think they're telling us we have just like a minute or two for
Okay.
last. So, um, Princess, do you have any, like, at the end of this, sort of last thoughts that you'd like to share? This has been such a beautiful discussion, and um, at the end of this, main points.
Yeah, for me, I'll just kind of answer your last question. I really would love to see more celebratory stories on communities we have not heard of or have not been
Mhm.
a focal point in news and journalism. Indigenous stories. Although, organizations like the 19th do need to do some of the stories that have totally been missing and lacking in mainstream media, and bringing out some of those hardcore facts and some of the harsh realities for folks in marginalized communities. There are so many beautiful and joyous stories that can be told, um, for so many communities. You know, the US is such a I mean, we have like every race, community, diversity. We have so many mixtures of folks. I mean, even checking off a box like I'm Black or I'm Native American, like there are so many mix with, um, Chinese and European, or an African diaspora, country mixed with something else, all of those standard systems should be kind of shut down and revamped at this point and be totally inclusive. Like, I should have no issue with understanding and learning and listening from various groups, tribes, communities, however they want to be identified. And I don't see why we are erasing history of any group in this country. It is so disrespectful and harmful, and I'm really praying that we as humans really do a major shift and get ourselves together. That's the best thing. And I think maybe more celebratory stories from folks that don't look like us, and all of us enjoying and embracing those stories would be very helpful.
Laura, do you have a closing thought real quick?
Um, well, I feel like I've, been on this journey, because there's been so many missing stories in my own life that I've learned as an adult. Like just, I feel like a lot of us, kid, we often create these political divisions because we can point to a time where, some inclusive policy passed, like the civil rights or end of slavery, or, and then say that's done and over with. And so it doesn't have any more impact on the, you know, on us now. And so, but, but I mean, I never learned how, the history of immigration policies shaped my own family story. Um, I didn't know. And so, you know, and I find, just how important it is for people to sort of connect those dots um, and, not blame, you know, shift blames on people on because of the consequences of these unjust policies, but really tell the stories about why, how, and how it's still continuous, even though, you know, and how, even though we can say that, marriage equality passed, or, so that's done and over with. But look at it now. It's never over because there's always going to be resistors, and um, uh, yeah, and there's always invisible ways that folks try to dismantle what we try to build. So I feel like, the what are those stories? I yeah. um, what's not being told? Who's not in the room? Who's not at the table, and why? So
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you so much. Laura, Princess, thank you so much. Everyone, Breaking the News is available for streaming on pbs.org for free. And thank you all for joining us. It's been lovely.